Good day. Welcome to Orange County Talk Radio. Orange County Talk Radio, produced by Sharc Creative, made possible by Robeson Oil, the house that Service built. Michael Labriola, landscape design and construction of Armonk and Westchester. They work all through the Hudson Valley. Jaguar Land Rover of New Rochelle, White Plains, Mount Kisco, and located all throughout the Hudson Valley. And by Hightower, Westchester, managing your wealth to a fiduciary standard. Down the Hudson Valley, too. We are joined by 99th Assembly District Representative Republican Colin Schmitt. His district covers wide-ranging area around Orange County, about half the county from around the Exit 16 New York State Thruway area, Harriman, on the Thruway up to New Windsor, just south of Newburgh, and out towards Goshen and Chester, cutting off the border right at the border with the west of town, and also a part of northern Rockland County, too. Colin Schmitt is the now newly redrawn 18th Congressional District Republican candidate in the general election in November. This district will now include all of Orange County, most of Dutchess, and a portion of Ulster County, too. Colin Schmitt, welcome back to Orange County Talk Radio. First of all, we have the gerrymander, the Hochulmander that got struck down by the special master, and now this new district was created. I find it interesting that Pat Ryan, the now former Ulster County executive, was able to run in the 19th CD in a special election there created when Antonio Delgado became the lieutenant governor. He wins that, but now he can move down into your district, the 18th, and run against you. What's making you run for Congress, first of all?
Hello, thank you once again for having me on. I certainly appreciate it. And we are just 50-something days now until General Election Day, November 8th. It certainly has been an honor to be the state assemblyman for the last 4 years, and it's a true privilege to be running as the Republican and Conservative Party nominee for, as you mentioned, the new 18th Congressional District here in the mid-Hudson Valley. My wife and I decided, we had conversations, how to best serve our community, best serve our state, and best serve our country, and felt that the one-party control we were seeing all the way from the State House to the White House and how it was impacting New Yorkers, the inability for our Hudson Valley values to have a seat at the table, to have a voice when it comes to what policies are being enacted, was something that was unacceptable. We had a unique opportunity here to offer up my service to the community, to voters on Election Day, and say, if you've had enough, if you are tired of that unified one-party Democrat control, if you are tired of the last 2 years of the failed policies, of the economic sufferings that so many of us have had, the turning on our law enforcement, so many people have turned their backs on law enforcement with the border security, national security crisis we had, that there is a better path forward, and decided to toss my hat in the ring. As you mentioned, there are numerous redistricting maps that came out. We always were running in the New York 18th. It's my home district. Spent nearly my entire life here. Grew up in Montgomery, live in New Windsor now, and want to make sure that our Hudson Valley values are represented down in Washington, D.C.
Mm-hmm. Now, Governor Hochul made what I considered basically the equivalent on a state level of what Joe Biden did 2 weeks ago on a national level with, and I'm going to say I'm a registered Democrat my whole life, but this is not the party I signed up for. And many Democrats, a new poll has come out this week showing that 73% of Democrats nationwide really are ticked off about that speech that the president made a couple of weeks ago. That was very dictatorial to me. And in a democracy, you just don't do that and say the things he said, vilifying anybody and everybody who doesn't agree with you. Governor Hochul, I think, on a state level, did the same thing when she said, Republicans, MAGA Republicans, get out of here, go to Florida. Lee Zeldin, Mark Molinaro, and all the rest, go to Florida. What did you think about her in a time when her saying that, and the president saying what he did, in a time when we need to unify, as Frank Luntz, who was a flat-out Fox guy, was just on MSNBC this morning with Mika and Joe, and they had him on. I was shocked they put him on, first of all. And secondly, he said it's time for this country to come together now or we will regret it.
I think you're correct that we need to be more unified than we are. We're seeing just left versus right hostilities, and that's not how we get stuff done. I've seen it in Albany. That's why I've worked to be one of the most bipartisan legislators in all of New York, between both the Senate and Assembly. I'm one of the most highest ranked bipartisan legislators, because we're not always going to agree on everything. But that's what's great about America. We don't always have to agree on everything. And if we disagree on some things, or maybe we disagree on almost everything, we shouldn't be telling somebody that they're not welcome, that they're not part of the process, that they should leave. That is not what we're about. That's a sign of a weak leader. That's actually a sign of not being a leader at all. And my process has always been, hey, listen, maybe even if we disagree 99.9% of the time, if there's that small percentage where we do agree, let's work together. Let's bring home a deliverable that helps my constituents and all residents of the state. Had that track record in the state assembly, willing to work across the aisle. And I think often I'm working with the health chairman, the state assembly health chairman. He was there for over 50 years, more than almost double the amount of time I've been alive. He's been in the state legislature, and we didn't agree on much. But when it came to one example, helping our local pharmacies, helping ensure our families have local health care access, I was the only Republican to join with him at those rallies to co-sponsor his legislation and say, hey, let's help those local pharmacists out who are providing that on-the-ground healthcare services to our community. I've done it in Albany, and I want to do it in Washington, D.C., because if you think Albany's broken, look to Washington, mentioned it's even worse. And our country deserves better leadership, and I'm looking to deliver that.
Your thoughts on the Inflation Reduction Act, which was, I guess, sliver of what Build Back Better was supposed to be, and this was supposed to be the highlight of the Biden administration. Now, to me, the Inflation Reduction Act is what did he get? About a quarter of what he originally wanted with Build Back Better. This is the equivalent of a guy walking in, sitting down with his boss and saying, I want a $10 an hour raise. And the boss says, I'll give you a raise, 50 cents, take it or leave it. And it seems like to me, Joe Manchin told the Biden administration and basically Chuck Schumer, I'll sign on now. You get the 50 cents. You don't get the $10 an hour. Meanwhile, a couple of days ago, on a day when the worst economic news in this country in maybe 43 years since I began my career up in Orange County in 1979 was released, there's a party at the White House. They recruit James Taylor to sing, of all things, Fire and Rain. I thought that was the most apropos song for the situation. And yet we seem just to be moving downhill, and the administration just seems to be totally blind to this. Whatever it seems like they need to make a right move, this administration always seems to make the wrong move. What's the mentality as you see it behind this?
Joe Biden, his White House, and House Democrats are totally out of touch with Americans and what we're going through right now. I mean, they have no plan for the crises, and we have multiple crises that we're facing. They have zero plan. When it comes to our economic issues, the inflation crisis that we're in, their answer is to spend more and more and more taxpayer money. That is the leading culprit fueling this inflation crisis, which is making it more affordable, more expensive and less affordable for Hudson Valley families. So day one, and that's why I'm running for Congress, is day one, we take the House majority back, we win the New York 18th district, we're going to stop this reckless spending. That is the first thing that we can do. They're having a celebration on the day when we have, yet again, record high inflation numbers. We see the stock market tank. We see people losing investments. We see people who cannot afford here in the Hudson Valley to buy the food they normally buy. I tell you, I have stories that stick out of my head from going door to door, people coming to my office. And one lady, she's a senior citizen. She lives in my hometown in New Windsor. She lives near ShopRite, Vales Gate, right at Five Corners. I'm sure many of the viewers and listeners know that area. She walks across the street once a week to ShopRite at Five Corners. She gets three things normally: an egg item for the week, a meat item for the week, and a cheese item for the week. Once a week, fixed income. She now has to decide which of those three items she doesn't get for the week. I mean, that's unacceptable. That is unacceptable. But that's just one of many stories that we hear. So we need to start looking at and talking about some real solutions, not just spending. So day one, when we get into Congress, we are going to stop that reckless spending, hold the Biden administration accountable, and start working on solutions like restoring American energy independence, which will help solve a large portion of the crisis that we're dealing with. And while we're at it, let's bring back our supply chain, remove that supply chain, take China out of the equation, and restore it to an American supply chain.
I read a story even yesterday about a guy in Hoboken in New Jersey who's cut back on cat food for his cat and the guy was a bartender. He's a sometimes actor. He works sparingly now. He said even cat food before the pandemic, 60 cents a can, now minimum $1.20 per can. He said, I eat less. I've lost weight. And people say to me, what a great job you're doing losing weight. He says, it's not that. He said, I can't pay for my food anymore. I can't even pay for my cat anymore. Immigration. Now in Martha's Vineyard, they're claiming they have a crisis, an island-wide crisis, because 50 migrants were sent up there by Texas Governor Greg Abbott. He also sends a bus to Washington, D.C., to the doorstep of Kamala Harris in D.C. Yet when flights by night landed at Stewart Airport in Newburgh, and they may still be continuing to do so, I didn't see Orange County declare a crisis.
That's a good point, and I'm glad that you've brought it up, because we've been dealing with the failed border policies of the Biden administration for almost 2 years now. And we've had those secret migrant flights from the Biden administration coming into Stewart International Airport, as well as Westchester County Airport, multiple times a week, many weeks. These flights coming in at 2, 3 in the morning, and then nobody knows what happens next. The Biden administration has made every community in our region a border community. We're directly impacted by these failed policies. Just a few weeks ago, I toured the border with Congressman Tony Gonzalez. He represents the largest border district in America. He represents a huge swath of the Texas-Mexican border. And we were down there talking with Border Patrol, talking with state, local, federal officials, business owners, and seeing what is going on here at the border. There are policies that aren't that big of a lift that could be done to end this crisis, because it's a dual crisis. It's a national security crisis, but it is also a humanitarian crisis. The Biden administration, that's why we need to get to Congress, they need to get their act together. There are physical security barriers that we can focus on, that we can construct and to help in areas. There are advanced technologies that we can implement and deploy that can make a significant impact. And just simply, you brought up the Inflation Act that they decided to celebrate on one of the worst inflation days in history. That called for the hiring of 87,000 new IRS agents, billions and billions of dollars to target mid-Hudson families, taxpayers across the country. Yet, our Border Patrol is not fully staffed. There are thousands and thousands of vacancies. If you simply, we're not even saying to add new positions to Border Patrol, but if you simply fully staff the existing positions that are allocated there, we could help stem this crisis that's ongoing. So instead of hiring 87,000 new IRS agents, we should be at the minimum hiring the minimum staffing level authorized for Border Patrol. And we see now that other communities are seeing this impact. Our local Democrat members of Congress, our U.S. senators, were silent when, as the Biden administration started these flights and they continue these flights. We don't know what their original origin is or when they land. Where do these migrants end up? This shows you the hypocrisy that's going on. We have solutions that could be put in place that I just mentioned. And let's not forget, we are in a fentanyl crisis in our communities. The leading cause of death for 18 to 45-year-old young Americans is fentanyl. We have disaster declarations or emergency alerts that have been put out. Might be a different term used by different counties, but by the Orange County District Attorney Dave Hoovler. I joined with him when he put that out just a few weeks ago. In Ulster County, in much of our neighboring counties, about fentanyl that's coming in, this poison. And every single amount of fentanyl, this poison that comes into our communities, comes over our U.S.-Mexican border. It illegally crosses. And what we saw when we were down there is that one backpack, one person who gets through the security perimeters and checkpoints and sneaks over. One person with a backpack has enough to kill every resident of the entire Hudson Valley. Could be in one backpack. That's how powerful just a single backpack of poison fentanyl could be. So we're talking about real life consequences to the failed policies down at the southern border that are impacting our communities. I'll fight to solve this problem, and we just can't go any longer with the failed policies that we've seen in Washington, and people have had enough.
And I've seen Congressman Gonzalez, the work he's done to try to find a solution. Glad you brought him up and pointed that out. Also at the border, too, we deal with human trafficking, and that's becoming more and more of a problem. And the towns in South Texas and along the Arizona border are having so many people drown as they try to cross that there's calling for refrigerated trucks in some of these towns to put the bodies in because they can't handle all of these drownings. Someone said to me last night, where's the humanitarian policy from Republicans to show that they care about the migrants, about the illegal immigrants? And to which I said, where's the policy in return that shows they care about people who are being humanly trafficked, people who are drowning, and people who wind up dead or have their lives destroyed by the importation of fentanyl?
And that's a good point that you bring up. This is a humanitarian crisis that's being exacerbated by Democrats in New York and by Democrats in Washington. A lot of people might not realize, but no one it's not just somebody just walks across the border. Every single person who comes across the border is exploited by a cartel or a transnational criminal organization. Every single person is either being used as a drug mule, is being used to smuggle through human trafficking, or is somehow ensnared by the cartels who totally control the passage from the Mexican side to the United States side. And failed policies, obviously they don't keep us safe is one problem, but there's also pull factors. So pull factors are policies, decisions, laws that actually help supercharge the crisis at hand. Cartels take these news stories, these policies, such as free housing for those in the country illegally, free tuition for those here illegally. The list goes on and on and on. The $15,000+ handout for those here illegally, the taxpayer handout that the Albany Democrats pushed through just last year. These are all taken and then used by the cartels to incentivize people to use them to come across, which greatly exacerbates the humanitarian crisis. You see just in our own backyard how my opponent, Pat Ryan, made Ulster County a sanctuary county, blocked local law enforcement from interacting with federal immigration enforcement services. These failed policies create a larger humanitarian crisis. The direct responsibility for this humanitarian crisis are on these failed policies. And that's why when we get to Washington, we're going to have to work not just on that physical security angle, but stopping these policies that create pull factors. It's what truly harms anyone who's coming over the border, the folks who are in our communities, folk who are living down at the border. If we really want to stop this, we need to stop the pull factor actions and legislation.
Colin Schmitt is the 99th Assembly District Representative in Orange County, about half of Orange County and the northern portion of Rockland. He is also the newly redrawn 18th Congressional District Republican candidate on the ballot in November. Everything you talk about here kind of ties into crime on a local scope, a statewide scope, and a national scope. It's all wrapped up into one. How do we deal with the growing crime surge in this country?
Absolutely. Crime is one of the top issues that I'm hearing about when we're hitting doors. We've hit over 140,000 voter contacts in this campaign thus far since June, and crime is on everybody's mind in a multitude of ways. We have so many people in our communities who commute to New York City. We have the highest percentage of FDNY and NYPD active and retired members of any district in the state. People are very upset, one, with the disrespect and lack of support for law enforcement and the impacts that crime are having in the greater New York City metropolitan area, across our communities, and all across the state. There are a multitude of things that we need to do at all levels. First and foremost, we need to fully support and fully fund and have the backs of our men and women who are first responders. We need to unequivocally support those who put their lives on the line to keep us safe. Without that, we have no way to keep our communities safe if we've turned our backs on the guardians who do that. Second, again, we need to fully fund our first responders in Congress. We want to start day one working to create bonuses for law enforcement, hiring incentives, doing what we need to do to thank those who have stepped up and to incentivize others to step up to do a job that's very hard to do. Second, we need to make sure prosecutors are prosecuting crimes. That is so important. We have seen in New York City and across this country where prosecutors are not, even in the Hudson Valley, where prosecutors are not doing their job. They're not prosecuting crimes that they can and they should be. We've seen just in Ulster County alone the failures of the district attorney to prosecute crimes in a timely manner, releasing violent criminals, some who have committed very serious felony offenses. They get released because they will not prosecute these crimes in the manner and the fashion that they're supposed to do. So at the federal level, fully fund our law enforcement, provide those incentives and bonuses to those who need it. And then as well, we need to make sure that prosecutors prosecute, and we need to use the powers of federal funding to ensure that prosecutors are prosecuting crimes and utilize that federal grant power to incentivize prosecutors to do their job. And when it comes here in New York, we see that the failed no bail law is contributing to almost all of this insanity that we're dealing with. And we need to have that law repealed. It is unacceptable. It's a failure. And you can talk to any law enforcement expert, any law enforcement leader, anybody who is involved with keeping our communities safe. Know that until that law is repealed and replaced, we're not going to be able to get this crisis under control. And it's time for the governor and the state legislative leaders to listen to. This is not a partisan issue now. All of our families deserve to be safe. And to do that, that law needs to go.
As we head towards winter, a new report suggests that Americans could pay 30% more in energy costs this upcoming fall and winter. To me, energy ties into national security. We are not energy independent anymore. How do we make ourselves energy independent? And with that, to me, increase our ability as a nation to defend ourselves too.
That's a great point. We're heading into the winter time, particularly in the Northeast. We have the inflationary issues to begin with. We have the supply chain issues, and we've lost our American energy independence. So we need to restore that American energy independence. That's something we will start working on day one in Congress. And that's an all of the above approach. We have obviously traditional fuels, and we have some of the best advanced technologies in the world. We should be the forefront of all of them. We should be looking at every option that ensures that we have American energy independence. And we also have to look at the failed policies of the Biden administration and House Democrats that have exacerbated this crisis. Let's just look at the strategic petroleum reserves that he's depleted, that President Biden and House Democrats have depleted. They have emptied these reserves to try to answer the energy crisis that we have. That is not a long-term solution. That's just a temporary political fix. And now we are seeing those strategic petroleum reserves at historic lows. There are a need to replenish those. If we enter into another crisis, a national security crisis, where we're going to call on those reserves, we're not going to have what we need in there. So we don't need just these Band-Aid approaches. We need to be looking at realistic solutions that do not put us in a weakened national security position moving forward like we're in right now.
Colin Schmitt, all the best on Election Day, and let's talk again.
Thank you. Happy to be back anytime.
Thank you. Great to have Colin Schmitt here again on Orange County Talk Radio, produced by Sharc Creative. I'm John Marino. This is the Cup of Joe political show, made possible by Robeson Oil, the house that service built by Michael Labriola, landscape design and construction of Armonk down in Westchester. They work throughout the Hudson Valley, as does Hightower Westchester, managing your wealth to a fiduciary standard, and Jaguar Land Rover of New Rochelle, White Plains, Mount Kisco, and located throughout up and down the Hudson Valley too. Catch all of our Orange, Dutchess, Westchester, Rockland, Putnam, and Fairfield County Talk Radio programming on our YouTube channel, Sharc Creative YouTube, and yes, we are on Apple Podcasts now too.